Hey man, how you doing? How's your day going?
Yeah, man, it's going great. I'm really excited for this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's alright. It's great. So well, let's dive in right into the questions. So tell us about your early life a bit. Where were you born, and where would you call home the same place, or is it someplace else? Someplace else?
Right. So I was born in Delhi, but then because of my dad's job, like we've been, here and there. So from the age of 0 to 3, I was in Delhi. From the age of 3 to 6, I was in Paris. Then 6 to 10, I was in Dubai. Um, and then 10 to 16, I was in Delhi again. And then 16 onwards, then I was in Charterhouse, like yourself. And then moved to London for Imperial College. So home, I would say, is bits of pieces from here and there, but most of the time, what I notice is that feeling of homeliness that you get. So like when I'm out here and I feel a bit sad or I feel a bit off, I do tend to listen to a lot of Hindi music or eat more Indian food, hang out with more Indian people. So I would say it's anywhere with Indian rooted people. Yeah,
Oh, all right. So you find that Delhi and India
yeah,
is your home and your birthplace. It's
yeah,
quite rare
yeah.
today's connected world, and most people find that they cannot live without the connections, without the internet. So would you say you could live without the internet now?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question. So, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about. So, if you're talking about me still wanting to do the things that I want to do in the future, and specifically for me, that is, trying to create opportunities, making a difference, having an impact, etc. It's just much easier to do it with the internet. But if we leave all of that aside, I think, over time, people can get used to not using the internet. Like we can go back to reading books or meeting people in person, etc. So for me personally, um, yeah, but it will take time. It will take a lot of time.
So you find that it take time to adjust, to not wake up and grab your phone, check the latest tweets or something.
Yeah,
Because I mean, personally, I could not. It's it would be really hard for me. It's just all these connections around the world. You
yeah,
know, you can have friends everywhere, and
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
connection to media like movies and stuff. I wouldn't be able to live that. But talking about that, do you have a childhood inspiration?
So obviously, apart from my own dad, the first person that comes to my mind is Tony Stark, and that's where my foundation. So that's when I wanted to. That's when I started that. That's when I decided that I wanted to become an engineer. And the story behind that is that when we were all kids, we want to be like a superhero or something. But as we grow older, people around us keep telling us grow up. But for me, like that never really went away. And so when I saw Iron Man, who is a superhero, who's just an engineer, and he made this really cool thing. So I think that's the first one. Second one would be Naruto. This anime, like there was just so much I could relate to with the main character that even it has a strong impact on me even today. Like the foundation of all my moral values come from him. Um, yeah, I think those two would be the main inspirations.
Well, without the internet, you probably won't be able to get access to those two. I reckon. I
I
mean,
completely
unless there's
agree. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
books or some or literature.
Mm.
So um, having the internet is a great success of mankind. It's a pretty big invention. But dealing on the basic level as a child, how would you deal with success or misfortune, for example? How would you react differently if you got a bad grade to compare to something big, or some big success?
So it's quite different as a kid versus now. And the reason for that is because as you grow older, your definitions of failure and success differ. Um, in all honesty, okay, so for me at least, it has changed quite a significant amount. And so as a kid, like you said, as a kid, when your failure would be something like, oh, getting not a great grade, and success would be getting a really good grade. A failure would be something like not getting head boy, and success would be, yes, getting a head boy, getting a certificate, or being acknowledged for something you're doing. So as a kid, it was really pretty straightforward. I think like the worst thing that could happen to you back then, technically, was that, you know, so when I moved back to Delhi, I was not great at Hindi literature, and I would just get really bad marks. Like I failed Hindi, not once, but twice. And so how do I deal with that? I just told myself back then, at least, that was my excuse. It was just that, well, I don't need this subject, so it's okay if I fail. And how do I deal with success back then? Success would be, you know, me becoming head boy. So 4 years in a row, I was head boy. And how do I deal with that? Well, again, because I was a kid, you would slightly, you know, walk around with a straighter back because you feel proud of yourself because you're head boy. But
that's quite an achievement, 4 years in a row, man.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. But you know, as you grow older, these things change. And, you know, like we talked about anti-fragile, the thing about misfortune and failures is that most people look at it as a very negative thing. But I think it was Will Smith that told me, well, not told me personally, but like on video. I mean, there was a video of him and I just saw it. And he said, failure is one of those things that you need to go through in order to be able to appreciate your success. And like, ever since then, like the way I look at it is that, you know, these failures, once you fail in something, you now know what doesn't work. And that's equally as important as knowing what does work. And I've seen a lot of people, they become successful, but that success doesn't stay for a long time because maybe their success was too rapid, or, you know, they just changed as a person. So having these foundation values as a person is very important. And I think that's how you kind of deal with these things. Yeah.
So you say that success is not just, you know, getting a head boy or, you know, winning or getting a lot of money. It's what comes from within the person, like their roots and, you know, what their, you know, moral compass is.
Exactly. So, for example, a lot of people, for them, success would be getting a good job and hence getting a lot of money. But, you know, I mean, sure, even I would like a lot of money. I would like to buy a Ferrari and a penthouse and a private jet. But the success comes from me being able to fulfill myself. So you will meet people in your life that are super rich, but they will still feel this emptiness in them. Why? Because they're missing something. So is that really success? And even watching Iron Man again as an adult, there was this one line when have you seen Iron Man?
Oh, absolutely. You know, yeah. we all been following the MCU for about 10 years
Exactly.
now.
So when he's in the cave and he's with Yinsen, and then Yinsen asks him, so Stark, do you have a family to go back to? And he says, no. And then Yinsen says, well, that means you're the man who has everything but nothing, because he's a billionaire, but he has no family. And that really made me wonder. I was like, do I really want to be like this? And that changed everything in my life. That was also one of those moments where you just went like, whoa, I really need to reconsider. Yeah.
Blown up, you know, in the cinema, you're just like, wow, this changed me 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
I wonder what the rest of the film has got for me. Well, you know, for me, for example, I watched Iron Man in English and in Russian, and I'd say that, you know, learning English is probably the turning point in my life. I find that without English, I just couldn't function on daily life. Well, studying in England is would be hard without knowing English. So yeah, that's my turning point. But what would be your turning point in your life? Your say, you know, B, C, and AD, as in referring to time.
Sure. So you know, when I was in 10th grade, it had been about 2 to 3 years where I kind of looked around and I realized there's a huge flaw in the education system, because I was seeing people who were getting 100% in their exams, but like if you genuinely asked them a question, they didn't know how to answer it, or they just didn't know anything about it. They would just say something along the lines of, oh, we've not been taught this. And that really made me wonder, is that the whole point of this education system? Because where I want to be in future,
exam machine and just learning what you're taught, not what's outside the box.
Exactly.
Was kind of problem at the time.
Exactly. So you're basically conditioning students to be a certain way so that they can benefit companies. instead of benefiting the world as a whole. And, you know, this is not something I realized back then, obviously, but I just realized there's something wrong. So, you know, on the side, I was just doing my own stuff, as in, like, I was making YouTube videos. I also started this small Rubik's Cube business where I was modifying Rubik's Cubes and selling them worldwide through a store in India. So the turning point was after that, when it had been about a year and a half since I had been doing this. And there was an article about this one guy on the Economic Times, which is a financial newspaper in India. And it was talking about how this one guy had changed his dad's hydraulics company, which was full of debt, by the way, and he turned it into one of India's biggest aerospace companies. And this guy, so my name is TEJASVA Malhotra, and this guy's name was T. Malhotra. And my dad just looked at the newspaper and he's like, "Oi, come here and have a look at this." And so I read it and I was like, "Whoa, that's insane." And basically, my dad was like, "Why don't you, you know, shoot him an email or something?" And I was like, "Okay, well," because back then I didn't really, you know, not overthink, but I didn't think much. I was just like, what's the worst that can happen when you send an email to the CEO of one of India's biggest companies? So I just found his email somewhere and I wrote to him. I said, "Dude, I think you're amazing and you're a really inspiring person." Then I told him that I wanted to become an aeronautical engineer and save the world. And I told him about my Rubik's Cube stuff. And, you know, I just kind of left it. I didn't really expect anything. I was just like, he reads it, doesn't read it, he doesn't read it. But to my surprise, he replied the very same day. And he offered me an internship in his company. And I was 16. And I had no idea what an internship even meant. So a few months down the line, I spent 6 weeks in his company in Bangalore, in another city. And from there, one of his friends then, gave me a scholarship to go to Charterhouse. So do you see how this one small email kind of just changed the entire course of who I will be as a person? Because here I was in India, not kind of very lost as a person, because I'm like, well, people are following this certain path, but I have no idea if I want to be doing this. And then all of a sudden now you're in a place like Charterhouse.
Incredible. That is, you know, it's so wonderful to see how you went from, you know, Rubik's Cubes to shooting airplanes into the sky and, you know, going to Charterhouse. That was
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, just one email is clearly life-changing. So, I mean, I reckon you're going to be thanking Financial Times in about, 20 years when you're a CEO of an aeronautical company and writing them emails, getting internships into your company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really, like, back then it wasn't much to me, but then now that I think back at what I did, it was, like, I would respect and admire somebody who had the guts to do something like that. I mean, because a lot of people, they just stop because they think they're going to fail once they start doing something. But if you really think about it, you're like, what's the worst that can happen if you just send an email? You know what I mean? Yeah,
it's just overcoming that anxiety of, communicating with somebody who's so high up, so unreachable, and all of a sudden they become, your friend. It's quite life-changing, quite extraordinary, I would say.
But hats off to them as well, I'm very grateful to these people who have had a significant impact on my life. It's just amazing that they as a human being are like that as well. But yes.
So you mentioned your dad as an inspiration, and clearly he helped you out when you needed him with that email.
Yeah.
But as we're teenagers and as we're kids, we sometimes do things that are a little bit out of the line. So let's pretend your parents are not listening to this episode of Clockmasters.
Yeah.
So what would you say say what you did that your parents still don't know about?
Do I really want to say this? Nah, I'm kidding. So